just wanted to do a quick video to kind of introduce the build. So pretty much picked this up. It didn't look like this, obviously. It had original parts on it, but this was a very beat up 750F 1980, the dual overhead cam. So yeah, I found it on Facebook Market when I was just browsing one day. I stumbled upon this bike for 300 bucks, and I was like, 300 bucks to jump into a new hobby?
I feel like a deer in the headlights of love.
And here I am. So obviously this is not a CB750 Super Sport or a CB750 front end or rear end anymore. I originally was not going to spend very much money on this build. I had started out on a pretty tight budget, and I decided that I was just going to get new carbs for it and put it on the road pretty much as is, drop the handlebars and just call it a day. Leave the stock original front end and rear end, all the original suspension, all that stuff. I was just gonna leave it, but after reading some comments about the original front suspension and seeing pictures of front end swaps, I knew I would have to do it. It was just too good. It was too much of a performance upgrade, and it looked too nice. I couldn't pass it up. So I started searching for a front end, and I stumbled upon this Gixxer GSXR 1000 front end on Facebook Market for a couple $100, and I snagged that. It came with everything: brakes, rotors, wheel, tire even. I'll probably get new tires obviously, but just for now anyway. Came with everything you see here, so pretty much complete. So all I had to do was buy conversion stem from Cognito Moto and bolt it on pretty much, no problem. And that whole entire thing, the whole entire conversion of the front end cost me about $560, I think, something like that. So really not that bad considering. You can easily spend 800 or more depending on the front end you use.
Okay.
This is from a 1000, so pretty hefty. Press it into the lower triple. You can find plenty of videos about that. Cognito has their own tutorial on how to do that as well. I think I got pretty much the body line that I want. I lowered the tank. The position of the mounting points for the front of the tank here are lower than they were and more far forward, but still leaving plenty of room as far as I can get for turning radius. So I got the tank lower. This is also not the original tank. This is from a 82 Super Sport. Could be from a 900F, I don't remember. But it's not the original tank. The tank that came with this bike was actually a custom tank, a CB750 custom, or CB750C tank, I think is what it was. Had a teardrop look to it. It's pretty ugly, I didn't like it.
That's a lot of damage. Have it a little more. No, that's a lot of damage.
I actually just sold it today to somebody who's building a different bike. So I got this tank instead, and I really like it. I think it looks good. I like the angles that it has. I don't know what I'm gonna do about these tabs, but we'll see. I might just leave them. Rebuilt the entire rear subframe, pretty much from here on back. Bent my own hoop, and it looks horrible color-wise. You can see how discolored the hoop is, and that's because I didn't have a tube bender. I did this with a forge. So the shop I was at didn't have any kind of tube bending gear. They had a little conduit bender, but it just was not, it was not gonna work. Putting kinks in the tube, it just trash. So I heated the tube up in the forge, which they did have. They have a forge. Got the tube nice and red, and then I bent it around a form, and I did it really slowly so that I wouldn't flatten out the tube. And then I went back through on an anvil that has a special little divot in it for tubing and for round things, and I tapped it all the way around to make sure it was round. And it actually turned out pretty well, but it's totally discolored. And it's yeah, I mean, it's going to get sanded and painted, so I'm not too worried about it, but it's obviously quite ugly at the moment. But I'm pretty proud of it because I did do it with a forge, and it's a pretty near perfect hoop as far as like the angles go. The angle here is tighter, so the original oil reservoir is not going to fit. I'm going to have to make a new one, which is what I was planning to do anyway. I was going to fabricate one that would fit up underneath the seat or just underneath it. Planning to do a cowl in the back that will be probably metal and have like storage. So I'm thinking I'm going to put the battery in the cowl so that I can have the rear tail be really low profile. And then I'm going to do an LED bar on the bottom for lights. Then I'm going to do handlebar turn signals. Haven't decided what kind of headlight I'm going to do yet, but it's probably going to be something a little bit more Street Fighter inspired than Cafe inspired, because I want something a little bit more aggressive and modern. Obviously, since I did the CBR rear end swap, I'm going to get a disc brake in the back, and I'm getting the dual disc brakes in the front. So pretty big braking upgrade, along with the suspension upgrade with the monoshock conversion. So that was something else I did, was a monoshock conversion. And pretty much I put welded a bracket in here, and then I have, this is from a CBR, the shock as well, and the linkage from the CBR too. And then I built this little system here, linkage system. It has a lot of adjustability in it so that I can change it for the rates that I need. Yeah, I just wanted to leave a lot of options with the suspension since I don't have the engine in it yet. I didn't want to finalize the suspension until I had the engine in and pretty much everything on it. And I could sit on it and kind of feel like where I'm going to be at as far as sag. Because obviously the suspension was not made for this bike. So that's pretty much the bulk of it. This is my first time doing this, so plenty of things I'm doing wrong, 100%. I screwed up a couple times already. When I pressed the lower triple, I bent it the first time because of the way that I pressed it. With the hydraulic press, I didn't realize, and it got a little bit off-centered as I pressed, and it warped the entire lower triple. So I had to buy a new lower triple for a Gixxer, but it wasn't expensive. It was like 20 bucks. It was like 20 bucks on eBay. So I was pretty happy that it was cheap. And so I bought a new one, and I did it again, and I got it right the second time. When I first started cutting a subframe, I didn't make enough marks or do enough measuring, and I should have built a subframe jig or something so that I could create the subframe more evenly, basically, because the way that I did it was kind of like take a step then take another, like I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. And basically what that means is
we don't seem to have a plan.
It was really hard to get it straight, and I had to use all thread and like bolts and like twist a little bit here and twist a little bit there to kind of like tweak it, and then tacking, grinding off, tacking, until I finally got it where it was straight enough you couldn't tell if it was crooked. Like right now it looks pretty much perfect, but if you got a tape measure out you could probably find some problems. But it's definitely not going to affect the ride at all, because to the naked eye, even looking at it now from behind, it looks pretty much perfect. The CBR 600 rear wheel, the swing arm is offset because well, that's how it's supposed to be on the chain side, so that there's room for the chain to come around the swing arm. So at first it looked a little bit weird. When I adjusted the spacers on the swing arm pivot bolt, it was fine. That was the other thing, is on the forums and on Facebook and some of the groups, I was told that this swing arm would pretty much bolt onto this frame. When someone tells you something bolts on, either it does or it really does not. I bought this, I put it on the frame, and I slid the original bolt in, and it did not bolt in. It was too skinny. The CBR rear pivot bolt was 17 millimeter, and the original CB750 pivot bolt was 16 millimeter, and they did not fit.
That was close.
So I had to bore out the pivot hole 1 millimeter, which thankfully is not very much. And thankfully I wasn't going from 17 to 16, because that would have been way more of a problem. I would have had to get new bearings. to match that size bolt for the swing arm instead of just changing it by 1 millimeter on the frame. So pretty easy. I just bought a 17 millimeter drill bit on Amazon and put it on my drill, and I bored it out 1 millimeter straight as I could and it bolted right on after that. And I had to actually lengthen the CBR rear pivot bolt by roughly 2 inches. That is more or less temporary. I may have a custom bolt made at some point, but for now it's fine, it works. It's plenty strong, I'm not worried about it. As far as fabrication, those are some of the main things. I'm gonna wait to finalize the swing arm angle and whatnot till the engine is in it, so I can make sure that the chain rides in the right place and there's no rubbing or bottoming out. As for electrical, I have an M-Unit Blue, which was one of the most expensive parts of this build, along with the dual carb conversion kit, Marae's conversion kit that I bought. Those parts alone were pretty much more expensive than everything else, but worth it because the dual carb kit is going to simplify the build, it's going to make it run better and have more power, and the M-Unit Blue is really going to add a modern touch to the bike with removing the fuse box, replacing it with a solid state system that's Bluetooth compatible, keyless start, you know, basically everything you could want in a retro bike that you would get in a newer bike. Those are 2 pretty big upgrades that I did that are costly but will be worth it. I started this bike out with a budget of about $2,500. That was the plan. Right now I'm sitting somewhere between $2,200 and $2,300 total spent. I just sold off some more parts today from the bike originally to make back some money, so that's going well. These projects tend to come in little bursts, so it's not like I'm dropping all that money at once. It's like $10 here, $5 there, $12 there, $100 there, and it just kind of builds up over time, but I've just been keeping track of it, and that's where I'm at so far. Definitely a lot of things I'm doing wrong, but I'm learning as I go. I'm building this in my 900 square foot apartment in downtown Portland, so it's not exactly the easiest thing. I have to load up the bike into the back of my Prius every single time I want to make a modification to the frame so that I can take it down to the community shop and do some welding. I have a membership there, and it's pretty handy. They have pretty much all the tools I could want: CNC machines, welding, plasma cutters, grinders, everything, a forge. Not a pipe bender, but pretty much everything I could want. And I just had to take the swing arm off, and then it fits in my Prius. Not too bad, not too bad. I did actually build a small one-wheel dolly trailer that hooks onto the hitch on my Prius, so that once the bike has an engine in it, I'll be able to hitch up the rear wheel, tie off the front end, and then dolly it around town, so I can take it back and forth from the shop and not have to worry about trying to lift it into the back of my car with an engine in it, which would be impossible with just me. Once the engine's in it, I'll just be able to back it onto the hitch, lift it up, and be ready to go. Should be not too bad. For the most part, the small bits and pieces have been pretty inexpensive. The rear swing arm was $30. The rear wheel was $60 with the tire. The rear shock was $20. The linkage was $15. Pivot bolt was $8. Like I said, it's just little things that kind of add up over time. Tank was kind of expensive. I had a really hard time finding a tank that wasn't damaged. I actually bought this tank on eBay from Germany, and it was pretty much mint for the most part, but when I got it, there was a small dent up here in the front. So I wrote to the eBay seller and I said, hey, you know, you said this was spotless, you said there was no dents. And they were like, oh, we're so sorry. So they went ahead and gave me a little partial refund, so I saved about 40 or 50 bucks on the overall price, and I paid, I think, $190 for this tank. So pretty pricey, but worth it because of the condition that it's in, and it came with a cap and everything. Did not come with a petcock, so gonna have to buy one of those, which are kind of expensive for some reason. But yeah, I worked on that dent a little bit, got it pretty much out, and then cleaned it up the rest of the way with some body filler, and you can't even tell it's there. What you see on it right now is a sandable primer that I did just to protect the paint from rust until I'm ready for the final coat. And then for that final coat, it's going to be an industrial yellow, which is going to be that Samurai 2K paint that I mentioned previously. But I'm going to wait to do that because I don't want to do it now and scratch it while I'm taking it back and forth from the shop. That'll be one of the last things I do, along with painting everything. Because I'm gonna have to put this whole thing together, make sure it's mechanically sound and electrically sound, take it all back apart again, and then paint everything. So that's kind of the plan. And as you can see, the front wheel is black already, but the rear wheel is a mixture of horrible colors. It was white at one point, and then someone spray painted it green, I guess. And then after that, it was powder coated purple. And I have no idea why they didn't clean it or strip it before powder coating it purple, but they didn't. And I started to work on that, stripping that down, and it is quite the job. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna do about that. I may try and sandblast it or something like that. Take the tire off and take it to the shop and sandblast it, and then paint it again to match the front. The spoke count is different. The rear is a CBR and the front is a GSXR, but you almost can't tell when they're both black. They look almost identical, so I'm not really worried about it. I think it looks pretty good anyway. Overall weight of the bike is going to decrease pretty good amounts from factory. Looking at a 15-ish horsepower gain. With the carbs I'm going to put in it, so should ride pretty well with the newer suspension and the brakes. But yeah, pretty happy with it so far, and the next step is putting the engine back together. So stick around, gonna be working on that pretty soon. Got to get all the parts sorted back out. I have them in bags labeled, but I want to make sure I have them all laid out in front of me before I get cracking on that. So gonna get my shop manual and start putting the engine back together, and then we'll go from there.